All right, so now that the Germans have had an opportunity to do their turn, we're going to move on to the Russian first turn. Now the Russian tanks, just to give you a little bit of background, they are standard tanks, T-34-85s. They move 12 inches on road, and they have what was used to be called hen and chick. And the hen and chick rule in version 2 said if they move more than 6 inches, they were unable to fire. Now the new hen and chick rule allows them to move, but they have an additional +1 to hit in addition to any of the other modifiers for range, concealment, gone to ground, things like that. So the Russians, in my opinion, got a massive improvement, especially the tank force. There is something else that you can move your tanks in. It's called moving at the double, and this actually works for all units. And moving at the double allows you to move twice the normal distance. Of course, you can't go into wooded area or areas that hinder movement based on the terrain features, but a road is certainly not something that hinders you, so you are able to move at the double. Now, moving at the double has its advantages and disadvantages. Of course, moving at the double, you move twice as far. Although moving at the double does limit you, that you aren't able to shoot that turn, and any shots in the return step from your opponent, he actually gets twice as many shots at you. So you got to use moving at the double very carefully. Of course, you still get your armor saves and things like that. It doesn't take away any of those, but moving at the double can have its advantages and disadvantages. So what we're going to do, just because I'm wanting to show you as many things as I can in this little this mock wrap here, I'm going to move the first tanks normal, and I'm going to move the far tanks twice as far. So we're going to move at the double. I don't think the Tiger tanks are going to have too much line of sight, if any, but if they do, so be it. We'll take the risk, but it does get the massive tank force up there quickly, and hopefully they can overwhelm the Germans and move on to the objective. So here we go. We're going to move the first platoon. Now, you don't need to roll to move your normal movement. Stormtrooper, as I did in the last step, was a special roll. But here, I'm just going to move these tanks 12 inches, as you see me do with the Tiger tanks and the other units. So again, they can move 12 inches. Going to move right up, center to center. Move them up to here. This one here is going to move right in behind. This one here, likewise, in behind him. He's going to move up where he was, and then right up beside him. So there we go. So that concludes their movement. So as you can see, they've moved a little farther around the bend. Not quite sure if they have any shots yet. We'll check out the line of sight afterwards. Now I'm going to move on to the second unit and do their movement. And I mentioned I was going to move them at the double. So we will measure for these tanks 24 inches. Now there is a little bend in the road, so you want to make sure that your ruler is bending with the road contours. Now when moving at the double, you have to move in a single direction. You can avoid obstacles, but where this is following a road, I'm going to have to stick with the road's path. I can't veer off and go all over at the double, skirt around buildings and keep my stuff well hidden. When you're moving at the double, you're concentrating on distance and speed. So you don't have a lot of maneuverability. So I'm going to move around, and it looks as though this 24 inches will get me right behind a building, which is very advantageous anyway. So it actually gets me right perfectly up to that crossroad. So one tank gets here, and the second tank started beside him. Again, you can use common sense and discuss this with your opponent. I doubt they're going to make you measure each individual tank, but if they do, well, so be it. That is actually the rules of the game. But of course, logic indicates if you started behind one tank, you will likely be behind that tank if you move the same distance. So there you go. So they're all moved at the double. Now there is tokens that you can put down that will actually indicate moved at the double, because it's important that your opponent, perhaps they were looking off at another game or something, didn't kind of see your movement there. Courtesy would indicate that you'd say, oh, these group moved at the double, I'll put a token down. That helps you and me remember that they moved at the double. So just keep that in mind. So they're way up there in the left-hand corner now, moved into the town. Up on the hill, which I'll have to adjust slightly to see. Apologize for the creakiness. There we go. So way up on the hill there, we got the rockets. Now the rockets are trucks. And typically artillery is able to dig in and protect themselves and do things like that. Now trucks are unable to dig in. You're not going to dig in a big truck into the ground. So they're not going to dig in. But what they are going to do is they're going to attempt to range in and drop an artillery template on the Germans. Now, we have to first be able to spot the Germans. So what we're going to do is we're going to move in, we're going to see, can these Germans actually see anything? Now up where the rockets are, perhaps not. But if you remember correctly, or from deployment, I did deploy an observer right here. He's right on the 12-inch line, so he was legally deployed there. Now, typically, you might have to move your observers the first couple turns to get into position to spot. He happened to be in a great, advantageous position to spot for the first turn. So what we're going to do is we're going to move in, and we're going to see what he can spot, and then I'll show you how the artillery templates work. So let's have a look at that.